Today on Diksha, we look at spiritual currents. Currents exist in nature. We have wind currents. For those of us, when you look at the weather forecast, where you see a map of the world, for example, and they show the pathway of storms, they show the currents or the paths that these storms take. And also things like warm air and cold air and all these things. For those of us who are familiar with the ocean, we know that the ocean has currents. There are certain tides that takes us out, and there are certain tides that takes us in. And even within the ocean, there are currents that move like rivers within the ocean to connect, let's say, different points. So currents are a natural part of our environment. What we do not realize, or most of us are unaware of, is that spiritual energy works the same way. Now, when we, let's say, think of spiritual energy, a lot of us think of something metaphysical and something that is very, in a way, nonsensical, because it does not fall within science or scientific, what we consider modern science. But what we consider to be spiritual energy is the energy that keeps the body alive. And if we want a simple physical example, it is the air that we breathe, but the element within the air that keeps us alive. Because if the scientists do an analysis of air, they will see that it was made up of a lot of different elements. So we have oxygen, obviously, because we know that our cells need oxygen. But the same air we breathe has also carbon dioxide mixed into it and all the other gases. So why are the other gases mixed in? And why is it that we can breathe in, for example, poisonous gases such as carbon dioxide, which if we were to breathe in mostly carbon dioxide, we will die. So, but air is made up of these things. So in all, it is a mixture, and we need air for life. Because a person can go a length of time without food, but a shorter amount of time without water. But if we were to go without air for 2 minutes, we would die. So the whole point is that air is the most necessary element to the human existence. But within the air, there is an energy that supports the body, that the same way that we have nutrients in food, and the same way we have a particular nutrient in air. So spiritual energy is referring to that nutrient within air. And that nutrient is something that we need explicitly to survive. Now, in the science of yoga, they call this prana, which is the life energy within air. So in nature, there are the currents of prana. There are certain places that have higher concentrations of prana and certain concentrations of, say, the opposite of prana, which is energy that will drain us, or energy that will take the life from us. So for example, a lot of the yogis and the sages and saints will go high up into the mountains, and not just in Hinduism. If we look at the monasteries in Christianity, they tend to be in the mountains. Very rarely you'll have let's say, a monastery at the seashore. Now, there are also other places of worship that are very far away or isolated from, let's say, everyday interaction. So one must journey quite far and quite perilously to reach to these places. Sometimes it is very hard to access. What this means is that the high concentration of energy, or the spiritual current or the pranic currents, are being utilized, and that is why they are built in these particular locations. It does not necessarily mean that all spiritual locations are hard to access. My whole point is that when we understand the currents of prana, or the spiritual currents, we are able to identify places where it will be, let's say, beneficial or expedient, it will be quicker to achieve spiritual progress in these places. So one of the places, for example, is deep within the forest. Scientifically, they will say, well, trees give off a lot of oxygen. So deep within forested regions, one can meditate in an atmosphere with a high concentration of oxygen, and this is beneficial to the human being. It is the reason why a lot of saints and sages will go deep into the forest. Another reason, obviously, is so that they will not be disturbed. The same can be said up in the mountains, where the air is thinner and the lungs must work in a different way and the body must function in a different way so as to achieve, let's say, optimal performance. So if a person goes up into the mountains, it is said that their entire body physically will change, but also the workings of the mind changes. And so a person is able to meditate in a different way. Now what this means is that they are following particular energy or particular energy patterns in deciding where to go. One other thing to let's say consider when one is pursuing spiritual discipline or spiritual practice is the time of day at which we practice. Because famously in Hinduism they say, well, you have the ideal times for meditation is between 4 and 5 in the morning, because that is when the atmosphere is most still. Even arguably from 1 a.m. till 5 a.m. is the best time to practice spiritual meditation and discipline. The reason for this, one is a quite logical one and the other is, well, not so logical, is that after a certain amount of sleep, the mind or the body, having become rested, can now sit in a quiet space and concentrate, meditate. Now, the reason for this is environmentally, the rest of the world is asleep. So the place is, let's say, less hectic. You will be less likely to be disturbed from noise, and even within the household. Because from 5 a.m., let's say, everybody is, well, getting up and getting ready to go to work. Even the birds and the animals outside, by nature, they will awake at a certain time to prepare to leave their nests at sunrise to, let's say, forage for food. So the world becomes active, our environment becomes active from, let's say, 5 a.m. So it is better for us, fundamentally, to meditate and pray before 5 a.m. in order to utilize the simple peace and quiet in the environment. The whole point is that beside place, time also plays a very important role in our spiritual discipline. And it all centers around the understanding that spiritual energy or prana, let's say, flows in particular tides and currents in a way that if we learn to understand it in the same way that we learn to understand the temperature zones and the weather, and the same way we learn to understand the tides of the sea, if we can understand spiritual currents, then we may be able to utilize them in a more efficient way. So today's topic was about the understanding of the spiritual currents and how to utilize them to maximize our spiritual progress. So once again, my name is Omkar, thanking you for joining me on Diksha, right here on Sankhya Television, the first Hindu TV station in Trinidad and Tobago, and your number one choice for inspirational, cultural, and spiritual programming.